The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everybody, this is Megan O'Boyle, and tonight we are going to, or today, depending on whether you're watching this, we will be doing a brief overview of the biosample collection at the conference and the informed consent process. Please feel free to type in any questions you have. There should be a box to the right of your screen that says questions where you can type in questions. And our presentation will be from two of our researchers who will be joining us at the family conference, Dr. John Bernstein and Dr. Joachim Hollmeyer. And I will have Dr. Bernstein give his presentation and show his slides, and you can send your questions in as you think of them. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, Megan, and thank you for the invitation to talk a little about the type of research studies that will be available for discussion at the upcoming meeting. So generally, these are what are called studies using something called induced pluripotent stem cells, and they're applicable to the study of conditions like Phelan-McDermid syndrome, other developmental disorders, and many forms of autism. So induced pluripotent stem cell technology is a recently developed technology that basically allows scientists to convert one type of cell into another type of cell. And as applicable to this type of research, it allows the conversion of either skin or blood cells into brain cells. And it's called induced pluripotent stem cell technology because what happens is the skin or blood cell is converted first into a stem-like cell that has the capability of becoming many types of cells, and then these cells can be coaxed to become brain cells. And this allows studies to be done on brain cells without the need to get a sample of brain tissue, which for many reasons is not a practical thing. So to date, with the development of this technology, people have used it to use a wide range of medical and genetic conditions. In the area of conditions most closely related to Phelan-McDermid syndrome, people have looked at Rett syndrome, which some people may have heard of, a rare condition called Timothy syndrome, sort of the neighbor condition on chromosome 22, the deletion 22q11 syndrome. And some investigators are already using this to study Phelan-McDermid syndrome, but they're in the early stages. So being able to get a sample of brain cells without sampling the brain directly allows one to do many types of experiments that you couldn't otherwise do. So you can study these brain cells in a dish and ask a variety of types of questions. So one type of question that can be asked is, what can you see in the brain cells that's different in patients with a particular condition that's not seen in people who don't have the condition? So you can really look for the cellular manifestations of a brain and body disease or condition. Once you see differences like this, and people have been successful in seeing them in many conditions so far, you can ask, how is it they're happening? So how does a genetic change in a condition like Rett syndrome or Phelan-McDermid syndrome lead to the changes we see in the cells? So what is the mechanism of the disease at the cellular level? Also importantly, if you see changes at the cellular level and you have these cells in the dish, you can test ways to try and make those cells look more typical. So you can try adding things like medications or other interventions on the cells in the dish to make the cells act more like cells that don't have a medical or genetic condition. And this is in the goal of, in the long term, hoping to develop things that may have some therapeutic benefit to conditions that are being studied. So when families of people who have a condition that might be studied by this condition hear about this type of research, they might wonder what would be involved in participating in such a study. It almost by definition requires collection of some sort of sample from patients with conditions, and there's the most experience to date with using skin samples for this, but increasingly researchers are able to use blood samples. And also in doing this sort of research, it's usually helpful for the scientists to have access to some sort of information about the patients who may donate samples for such a study. And in different studies, this takes on different forms. One of the most straightforward ways of doing it is if people have participated in a registry such as that run by the Phelan-McDermid Syndrome Foundation, that information could be released to the study with appropriate permission. Hearing that a skin or blood sample might be collected, most people are familiar with how blood samples are collected because that's a fairly common procedure. I could talk for a moment about how skin samples one way that they can be collected. So one thing that's important to do is that you want it to be as comfortable a procedure as possible. So numbing medicine is applied to the skin, and some people may have heard of things like lidocaine. It's a numbing medication. That's one that can be used, and it can be put on the skin as a cream to numb the skin before maybe a small amount would be injected to further numb the skin. And the skin can, in theory, be taken from most parts of the body. Commonly, it's taken from the forearm by convention. And a very small sample is required because that initial sample isn't what's being studied. Those cells are being grown and converted into other types of cells. So really, the smallest piece that, of skin that can be taken is enough. Similarly, a small amount of blood is usually adequate for this type of study. In the case of a skin biopsy, the mark that's left where the biopsy or sample is taken is small and usually heals like a cut would over the period of several days. In this type of study, there usually isn't the promise of a direct benefit to people who participate because it's exploratory research and we really don't know for sure that something will or won't be found out and how helpful it might be. But the hope and goal of the research is that important knowledge will be learned that may help people with the condition being studied in the future. In general, the risks of any particular study are specific to that study and are usually present in information that can be learned from consent forms and speaking directly with an investigator. But when samples such as blood or skin are collected, there's always at least a small risk of some bleeding occurring or infection, but all usual medical precautions are taken to avoid that, and most experts agree that these risks are indeed very small. Also, when information is being shared, there's at least a theoretical risk that even with standard precautions, such as removing people's names from records and other identifiers from records being exchanged, that there could be the inadvertent release of someone's medical information due to participating in a research study. Other important considerations in thinking about any research study are that research studies should always be presented as voluntary, so families and patients have the choice of participating. And almost always, the decision to participate can be taken back later. So if someone hears about a study and decides to participate and later decides that's not a good idea, there's often the opportunity to reverse or cancel that permission up until such a time as the study might be finished, at which point it's hard to remove participation or discontinue participation. And before participating in any research study, individuals or their families should have the opportunity to talk in detail about the nature of the study and its potential risks and benefits or lack of predicted benefits to the individual with a member of the study team. So if anyone on the call would like to learn more about this type of study, one opportunity will be at the upcoming meeting in Orlando next week, the Phelan-McDermid Syndrome Foundation meeting. Myself and personnel from a study looking at Phelan-McDermid syndrome will be there from Stanford University. The foundation is hosting an informational meeting on Wednesday evening at 5:30. The location, I think, is to be announced. In the meantime, if anyone hears about this type of study and would like to learn more and about the Stanford project in particular, they're welcome to contact us. Megan, our host this evening, has offered to relay messages by email to the study team in advance of the meeting. And obviously there'll be an opportunity to talk about this in detail on site. And there will be the opportunity to enroll in the study at that time after people have learned more about it. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and whoever may watch this online between now and the meeting. We're happy to take any questions that we can answer now.
Okay, thank you. I have a few things to add, and then received some questions. One clarification is that this study was something that was started at Stanford and has already had some skins collected. Those who have participated in that, Dr. Bernstein, can they give skin again?
Oh, I wouldn't think that there would be a reason to provide a repeat sample. One of the comparative benefits of skin samples compared to blood samples is the skin samples tend to be very durable. So they're usable for quite a long time. And while that's very generous of someone to consider, at this point there isn't a time to think that someone would want to do that again, or there would be a need to.
Can those families give blood at this point? Because I believe that this collection will be shared.
They could, if they would like to.
Okay.
They would need to sign they would have to discuss the new part of the study that involves blood, because that's a recent addition to the Stanford study.
Okay, so it does involve new paperwork. Excellent. I know we have a number of families from the Stanford study that are signed up to donate blood. Another question I received, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Holmeyer.
Just to briefly add that our experience is much bigger with skin cells. So the most technology has been developed into skin cells. So the field is clearly behind in using blood cells for lots of different reasons.
Okay. I believe these samples, though, will be stored in a collection through the NIMH, and the blood can be used in various other ways in the future. Was there, I noticed in the name of some of the documents, can you just explain the difference between an informed consent document and an assent document?
So, do you want to take that, Joachim? Or?
It doesn't matter. I mean.
Okay. So, a consent document is the document that either the participant or their representative, which in the case of a child is typically their parent or guardian, and that's the document that gives permission for that individual to be in the study. Assent documents are sort of an accessory to a consent document that are respecting the idea, the important idea, that people who are not yet in adulthood, children, should be involved in decisions made about them to the best that they are able. So in research studies in general, children who are able to understand the nature of a study and to complete an assent form, either alone or with assistance, are able to do that to indicate that they participated in the decision to participate in the study. In the case of children who may not be able to have a full understanding of the nature of the study or to complete an assent form, there is an option not to complete an assent form as long as the family and the study personnel are in agreement that that's not possible, and that the member of the study team writes down that it isn't possible for that particular individual.
Okay.
And typically they're not even considered for children younger than age 7. So it's really a question for people between 7 and 18 whether or not they would be able to complete an assent form. And if they're able to, they would need to, because we don't want to enroll someone in a study that they don't want to be in.
Okay, but if you have a child that's intellectually not able to understand it, that document would not be necessary.
Right.
Okay. Another, if you could clarify what a proband is. A lot of the document discusses proband versus control.
You want me to take this?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, that's actually relatively simple, because the proband is always the person who has the disorder, and in this case a Phelan-McDermid syndrome, and the control is basically an individual who doesn't have the disorder.
Okay.
It's just a scientific terminology for somebody who has the disorder and somebody who doesn't have the disorder.
Okay, I'm getting to the end of some of our questions. If anybody wants to type in any more questions, or we can give audio to all the people that have called in, and they can speak their questions. But I don't want to unmute you until you know that we're going to hear what's going on the other end of your computer. So I will look for typed questions, or our technical assistant can unmute everybody. Doctors, is there a preferred location for the skin biopsy?
She means on the body.
Yes.
I've lost audio. I've lost audio.
Okay.
Okay, I think we just got audio back. Sorry about that.
All right.
All right, that's right. Again, we were answering a question about where skin samples can be collected from.
Correct. Is there a place on the body that would be preferred, or from a scientific standpoint, or is it just up to the parents?
It's largely up to the parents and to the person collecting the sample in terms of what they think on that particular individual will heal the best. But
Okay.
there are choices.
Okay. Will there be separate documents if a family is donating blood and skin? Does one document handle both donations?
Yeah, my understanding is that currently for the Stanford study, there's one document that allows
Yes.
participants to choose one, the other, or both.
Yes, that's correct. It's the
Okay.
same also for controls. I mean, there's one document where you basically, which allows both skins and blood.
If there is a family where a mother, a father are giving blood and the child with PMS is giving blood, does that mean 3 sets of documents will need to be signed?
Correct. This will be 3 sets of documents. There will be basically 2 individuals without the disorders, which will be controls, so there will be 2 control documents, and 1 for the child as a proband.
Okay. And do all the consents that involve the Phelan-McDermid syndrome patient require 2 adult or 2 parent signatures?
For the children, we need 2 signatures. For the adults who donate blood, 1 signature will be enough. But for the children, we need both parents to agree.
So a patient over the age of 18, you only need 1 parent?
A patient over the age of 18 is, and he's able to give consent, he has to give consent himself.
Okay. I'm thinking of adults with PMS that are not able to consent themselves. Do they
Then
still
we
need
need
2
again
parents?
both signatures.
Okay. So I think that the answer that we all need to understand is all PMS patients need both parents,
signatures.
if living, to sign.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Correct.
All right. I have not received any other questions.
Hey, Megan, we have a couple more questions. Shall I just unmute and allow people to ask their questions? So Brian, I know you have a question, and I've just unmuted you so you can.
Okay.
Oh, thanks. Hi, this is Brian and Katie, and we were just wondering, in terms of doing the biopsy, can we take a sample from his back where Ryan can't reach it? He's very quick to go to Band-Aids or sutras or things like that. So is it possible to take the skin sample from a part of his body where he can't easily reach it?
Usually that's an option. The final decision that is left to the physician who's getting the sample at the time of enrollment. But yes, generally the back of the arm or the top of the back near the arm are options.
Thank you.
Sure.
Patty, do we have more
Okay.
questions?
Yeah, we do. Cynthia, you had a question? I've just unmuted you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I didn't realize that. I wasn't on my phone. I thought I was just typing in the question. if we participated in the Stanford study, but now we'll be giving blood, we will still have to fill out new consent forms.
That is correct.
That is correct.
Okay.
The old forms didn't include blood samples, so that's the reason for that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And it also didn't include to transfer basically the cells to the NIH. So there's, just to make it absolutely clear, that people have also to consent then first to give the samples, and then they have also to consent that these samples will be given to the NIH.
So there's the project has expanded, and then there's now the opportunity to have not just the Stanford project, but other projects funded by the NIH to have access to the samples so that more progress potentially can be made more quickly.
So one other quick question. Like, if you have a child that is able to answer these questions, which my child would be, but if you tell her that, you know, you want to take her blood, she's going to tell you no. Because she's not going to want to give you her blood, but that's because that's the way she does it all the time. How do you deal with that situation?
The people who are there on site having the discussion with you and your child need to build a consensus about what makes the most sense there at the time. How old is she?
She's 9, but I can tell you, like, when we did the Stanford study, they asked us for consent, and Ashlyn could speak to them, and we spent 45 minutes talking with her because they wanted her to answer the questions, and then she couldn't really understand what they were even doing.
Right. Well, that's an important judgment. So if there's the decision, based on the available information and your knowledge of your family, that she's not able to understand, then we don't require, usually people who don't understand are not required to participate in an assent. So it's a judgment decision.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Geraldine, I believe you have a question. I'll go ahead and unmute you now. You should be able to speak.
Oh, well, thank you. My question has already been answered, and that was who needs to sign the consent form, and we now know it is both parents. What do we do in the case that one parent is not available?
So there are different definitions of not available. In terms of this consent form, not available means not available by telephone or fax or other practical means. So it usually means someone who no longer has custody of the child and is not reachable.
If parents are divorced and one parent is at the conference with the child, what will be the process for trying to obtain consent from the second parent?
Ideally, in situations like that, the other parent is contacted in advance and might review the consent form and have an opportunity to ask questions and sign it in advance so that the second parent can sign it in person, and then both signatures would be there. There isn't really a way to have a parent who has custody not participate in the consent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Sue, I believe you had a question. I want to make sure your question got answered as well. Your line is open now.
Thanks. I just have two questions, mostly from the other parents. One is some of the parents are concerned about not being able to swim, and they wanted to know if waterproof Band-Aids would suffice or they shouldn't do that at all.
Yeah, I think that they should ask the physicians who will be performing the skin collection on site based on how exactly they're doing it and their recommendations for the care of that after it's done.
Okay, thank you. And also, I know Megan's doing the consent, getting the consent form together with you guys, and do we have to make two full, complete copies, one for Stanford and one for the parents?
Yes,
Yes.
please. We need. Yes, please.
Okay.
Well, I think the one full original would be given to Stanford and the copy would be given to the parents.
Right.
But Sue, your question was, do we copy just the signature pages?
Right. That was
okay.
The family should be given their copy if we can't force them to take it home if they don't want it, but they need to have an opportunity to take it because it's their right.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And then finally, Donald, you're the only one that hasn't had the opportunity to answer the question, so I just unmuted your line in case you thought of something now. So Donald, you can speak now.
I don't have any questions, but thank you for asking.
Okay. I don't have any further questions, Megan?
No, I don't think we have anything else. And again, we will have an opportunity to review the documents as a group at 5:30 on Wednesday evening in prior to the meet and greet at the conference center. And both the Drs. Bernstein and Hallmeyer, who are on this call, will be in person in the collection room, explaining the documents as needed and making sure all the signatures are correct. So this is not your only opportunity to ask questions. And we're also taking questions via email, and you can send those to me at meganoboyle@gmail.com, and I will forward them to the Stanford team. So unless our Stanford team has any more points to make, I think we are done.
Thank you very much.
I just want to thank you, everybody, for the interest in the study.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will see you next Wednesday.
See you on Wednesday.
Good night, everyone.